to our band for the super funky, fresh tunes. I'm very excited to march with this live band of activists and movers. Thank you guys. So first, welcome. I want to thank every person, activist, and leader that is here today. We're here specifically to call for an elected civilian review board that will hold police accountable here in New York City. We are also here to very lovingly remind CNN-loving moderates and fake allies that your favorite corporate brands co-signing the movement does not mean that we will shut our mouths and go home, okay? Mainstream media has folks thinking that this is over because of a few watered-down reforms and a messy budget, but to the contrary, these performative city council and statewide reforms have propelled us to go harder because the media is no longer covering this, and the government wants to slap a Band-Aid on our rage, but the issues still remain. As long as the NYPD exists, they will continue to brutalize our communities. And our movement has proven that it's not just about a few bad apples, but the whole system that was built to subjugate. And Black and brown lives will continue to fall victim to a system meant to repress them. And so we have to continue to rally, we have to continue to march until eventually, legally, economically, and socially, Black lives will matter. So many of you here today may not have been introduced to the campaign, and to those folks I say welcome to a radical movement for reform and oversight that looks to redistribute justice as we know it today. For 5 years now, we have been working quietly in the background to make a name for ourselves and to perfect a piece of legislation that we believe will fundamentally change the power dynamics that we see. Ones that favor a racist, brutal, and militarized police force. We've sat in city council meetings and we've disrupted city council meetings. But today, we're here to prove that we are a mass movement of the people and we cannot do this without you all. So thank you for coming. Right now, the campaign for an ECRB is the only reform in New York City offering accountability. While defunding and abolition are hot topics on every activist's radar, our reform work is not mutually exclusive, and we need radical activists to stand with us to protect vulnerable communities in the meantime. Knowing that this effort may take time, what do we do now for our dark-skinned kings and queens and our trans and non-binary movers and shakers and any other marginalized group that is actively suffering every single day? AG Tish James had a cute little hearing and counselors are encouraging the use of the CCRB, but we all know that these are performative options at best and won't make a difference. Right now, the NYPD has control over punishing officers that follow NYPD mandates. That doesn't make a lick of sense. And regardless of any of our individual views, we need to acknowledge that the current system makes it clear that the NYPD rules our city. They're allowed to throw away CCRB recommendations, they work to appoint members to the board, and most recently, during the pandemic, they've actually refused to participate in investigations which delay the investigations and waste taxpayer money. We're here to say this is absolutely unacceptable, and we will no longer be tolerating clear abuse of power and political clout. Right now, our legislation is sitting in City Council, waiting for it to be released so it can be put forth to the Public Safety Committee. We need the City Council to pass an ECRB to create an elected and empowered board that puts restorative justice into the hands of our communities and removes the commissioner's so-called right to discipline. We need a special prosecutor that won't make amicable deals with the NYPD like DA offices do. And to get any of that, every single person here needs to stand with us and join the movement to demand an ECRB as a necessary and radical change to our power dynamics and an advancement to the Black Lives Matter movement. While our fight began 5 years ago, the fight to free Black bodies is as long as this country has been conceived. It is only through mass movements backing radical change that we have seen any sort of change. And it is only through mass movements that we can envision a future where racism and other human rights concerns may finally see its end. Our campaign is rooted in radical people power, and we want all of you here with us. This is one of many actions we'll have coming up as we embark on our city council journey. So we call for you to stand with us to force our elected officials to get in line or get out of the way. Right now, we're going to hear from leaders of our movement. We have campaign members and endorsing members of varying backgrounds and talents speaking to the importance of the work that we're doing right now. After, we'll march, at which point campaigners will be engaging with you all. Please engage in good faith and keep your hearts and your minds open as you listen to these radical folks with deep experiences. So without further ado, please welcome our first speaker, Muba Yarafulani, member of the steering committee of the Campaign for an Elected Civilian Review Board.
Thank you. I greet you with the word Asante Sana. It means thank you in Kiswahili. My name is Muba Yarafulani. I am a resident of East New York and a member of the ECRB. I greet you with two words this particular evening, and I will get into it as we move along, as I move along speaking. The two words are fed up and change. Those are the two words that we are going to talk about this evening. Fed up and change. So let's say fed up and change. So let's go with fed up. We, and I'm saying we, because I believe in unity, we are fed up of the police department being a criminal, doing criminal acts, and walking away free. We are fed up. We are fed up of people, especially African American young people, being set up by the police department and sent to prison with falsified evidence and jailed for years. We are fed up. We are fed up of women being raped and brutalized by the police department, and they walk away free. We are fed up. We are fed up of hearing so many victims in the hands of the police department officers who believe that our lives are like roaches. They step on us and they kill us with no remorse. We are fed up. We are fed up. We are fed up that our voices are not heard for righteousness, for justice, for accountability. We are fed up. We are fed up. And last but not least, and there are many more other fed ups that you all can add, many more fed ups, but we are also fed up of hearing so many of our victims have to say, I can't breathe. That means when you use the word I can't breathe, it means that I am dying or I am going to die. So we are fed up of that. We are fed up of that. So let's go to change. We know we need not one, we need a change in the way how police officers are being held accountable for the crimes they commit on a daily basis. So we need that change. Fortunately, for New York City, we are about to make that change. Why do I say that? We have a radical, because remember, that's a very important word. When I was growing up, they always tell us radical people are the worst people to be around. They told us they are the worst people in the world, that they don't want anything good to come out of what's happening in the world, in our society. But we know, and I hope you know, as I'm saying I know, when you are radical, you fight for righteousness. So that's the best people to be around, radical people. With that said, we have a council member in East New York by the name of Inez Barron. And I have to share, this is important. Her husband, who's also in the assembly, is also radical. So those are two radical political figures that we do not see within any political group. But let's go back to our radical council member, Inez Barron. Because of her radical way and way of fighting for justice, she have joined with the elected civilian reward bill campaign members and have sat and have written legislation to make sure, again, to make sure that every police officer that commits a crime will do the time. With that said, it is very important that we support that legislation. That legislation that says community needs to be part of that conversation as to how a police officer should be tried, convicted, and serving time. The victims are those that need to be even more involved in that conversation, because nobody can feel the pain that victim, family, and victims themselves are feeling, or can really appreciate how they feel. So they're the best people to talk about it. They're the best people to help make decisions about it. Everything will be coming from the community. You have a little brochure. It is very clear what the ECRB stands for. Very, very clear. We must have an independent prosecutor. It's a powerful word, right? Powerful word, independent. Now, independent means, you know what, right? Hey, you can, the DA, New York City DA can't touch it. The state, Letitia James, who have really have disappointed us, became the first black woman, the first black DA. What have she done? She just she buy the bullet. She just bite the bullet. So in other words, she just took it in and leave it right there. Isn't doing anything for us. But the police commissioner can't have a say in this decision making. Because we know that it's police policing each other. De Blasio, the mayor, or whoever the mayor going to be in the future, can't have a say, because we know that's another police, but not in the blue uniform. We know that. So therefore, this independent prosecutor must have no contact with them. No contact with them whatsoever. The power of the ECRB is to make sure that when a police officer go to see the grand jury, which will no longer exist in the manner the ACRB is going to be conducting conditions, or let's say whole accountability. Yes, use the word whole accountability. The ECRB is going to hold accountability towards the police officer. The grand jury have nothing to do with that, because we know what they do behind doors, right? They make the decision. But I'm going back to say, when a police officer is charged and going to that courtroom where justice is supposed to take place, under the ECRB, that police officer is not going to be coming through that front door. He or she will be going through the back door in handcuffs. In handcuffs. We are going to see our victims who always come out of the courtroom crying because no justice was served. However, on that day, our victims and victims' family will come out with tears of joy and laughter, because they have experienced justice under the ECRB, Elected Civilian Review Bill. Thank you very much. Asante Sana.
Oh, Muba's short. Special shout out to Muba, who is, someone that sees these issues daily as a Black woman, but also lives in one of the districts that is most affected by police brutality, East New York, which is one of the reasons that we're so grateful to have Council Member Nez Barron on board. Before we bring our next speaker out, let's make him a little comfortable. When Black lives are under attack, what do we do? When Black lives are under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back.
Perfect. Okay, so our next speaker is James Wright, who is a civil rights activist as well as a union labor activist, and he can speak to some of the concerns on the ground. Please welcome Jimmy Wright.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Wright, and I'm a supporter of the Freedom Socialist Party and the campaign for an elected civilian review board. Let me start off by saying I don't think for a minute that the legislation we are proposing with this campaign will solve the problem of police misconduct and brutality in our neighborhood. But we must start somewhere, for this is long overdue. Long overdue. Black lives do matter, and we can no longer tolerate what is going on. The process of working for these reforms through the traditional channels have failed us. The limitations of our system has caused it to fail. It's going to take a change. As Sam Cooke said, a change is going to come. And we must bring that change together, united.
That's right.
All the colors of the rainbow. In the last month, I've seen some beautiful colors of unity that I haven't seen before. So we must continue the fight. The Civilian Review Board is powerful because it makes real demands which challenge the status quo. An interesting thing about this review board is that it has 18 members. 5 are appointed by the police commissioner, 5 by the mayor, and 5 by the city council. We are not represented on this review board. We have no say. We need the community to be part of this because they have failed us. Black people, people of color, poor people have been failed by this community board. So now we must stand up and demand change. I want to emphasize that I'm a retired member of DC 37. I'm also involved in their political action committee. And we have been pressuring them, us members, along with Debbie Rose in Staten Island, who's my council member, to join us in this fight. And we all need representatives from our community to join us. And now is the time. It's election year. And we have to keep our foot on them, just as they have their foot on our neck. We must keep these members that we elect accountable. That's our role here. And if you're interested in more information about the Civilian Review Board, there'll be people passing these out with information and who to contact so that we can all get involved and be united on this. Thank you.
Next up, we have a speaker from the Integrate NYC and Parents Supporting Parents, New York Youth Advocate Group. Please welcome Jace Valentine.
What's up, y'all? What's up, y'all? Black lives! Black lives! My name is Jace Valentine. I'm an 18-year-old public advocate with Parents Supporting Parents, Integrate NYC. I'm a first-generation Jamaican American, Rastafarian, and most importantly, a Black woman. Let me make this clear from now. I'm gonna say it right off the bat, that this message is not new. Okay? It's been the same message for years now. I can tell you that because I've been doing this work for years now. How many times can we say the same thing over and over again and the message is not heard? How many ways can I say Black Lives Matter? How many ways can I say defund the NYPD? How many times can I say our schools are segregated? Black women need to be protected and respected. LGBTQ lives matter. Support our marginalized communities. And take your knee off my neck. It's time to support the youth of NYC because the future of NYC depends on it. I successfully made it out of high school last year. And I did not get put into the school to prison pipelines, which is not the case for most of our Black and brown youth. Metal detectors, normalizing policing, criminalization is the case though. and that's the problem. I have a 7-year-old brother who now wants to cry whenever I leave the house. He shakes. He sends me voice notes to please avoid the police, to come home safe and alive, and hugs me so much tighter now because he's scared and knows what's gonna happen if I do get stopped. My message has been the same for years. Police-free schools is a must. My little brother thinks that we're superheroes, activists, supporters, allies. He says he wants to be like me when he grows up. And it brings me to tears because I don't want him to have to fight for anything. Black lives. Black lives. I don't want him to be criminalized on a day-to-day basis with metal detectors in his school. I don't want him to be treated as a suspect and not a student. Defund the NYPD.
Yes.
I fight, and I won't stop fighting because I need to ensure the future of NYC is bright. Black lives, Black students, Black future, Black LGBTQ. My name is Jace Valentine, parent support and parents to integrate NYC. Black lives, Black lives. Love y'all, stay safe. Yo, Black lives?
Thank you, Jace. That was a really powerful moment. We know that youth are affected by police brutality and violence so often, and it hurts that Black people have to go through the process of adultification, being made to be seen victims, to be victims, or to be seen as criminals before they even have a chance at opportunity. This portion of our speakers list is dedicated to folks that represent oppressed groups that face police brutality here in NYC and represent the reason that we do the work that we do. Up next, we have a radical woman, pun intended. We have Miss Betty Maloney, who has been a freedom fighter for decades and represents radical women. Radical women, y'all! And the Freedom Socialist Party. Welcome, Betty.
Yes, I've been a radical woman for a long time. And I'm out here like I've been out here before because Black women's lives matter. Say their names. Breonna Taylor's life matters. Breonna Taylor's life matters. Sandra Bland's life matters. Sandra Bland's life matters. And Eleanor Bumper's life matters. Eleanor Bumper's life matters. Time and again across the United States, the horrors of police violence against women go unanswered. The murder of Breonna Taylor in her own home connected to our hearts and our collective outrage, especially for many of us here who were on the streets of New York City when Eleanor Bumpers was murdered by New York City cops in 1984, also in her own home. There's no, and this is a picture of her. How threatening could she be to a cop, and many cops coming into the house, into her apartment? But she was murdered by them in 1984, and I remember marching on the streets, you know, for justice for her. No justice has been given to them and will not be given to them until we strip the blue line of their power and abolish the unjust court system that is built to serve the capitalist system and protect private property. I want to draw attention to the stake that women in particular have in the creation of elected civilian review board and the way our lives are affected by rampant police misconduct and violence. I don't think there's a woman in this place here that hasn't had some contact with the police that's been either harassing, derogatory, or even to the point many have experienced violence. It was on the basis of this and our concern that Radical Women, a national socialist feminist organization, allied with the Campaign for an Elected Civilian Review Board. Women of color, and gender or sex role non-conforming women are often seen as targets for sexual harassment by the police. We face extortion to perform sexual acts for cops in order to avoid arrest, which Muba already mentioned, or to protect our children and grandchildren from harassment or arrest. Our reports when we are victims of crime are not believed or are ignored. We are subject to humiliation when interacting with police, and worst of all, too many of us have lost our children and our grandchildren to police violence. Most survivors of police assaults do not come forward to report attacks from the cops. Structural racism and sexism make it virtually impossible for women, and especially women of color, to report a police officer as their rapist. Immigrant women rightly fear being deported if they make a complaint. Trans women of color are acutely vulnerable to the torture of being misgendered and held in male facilities where they are subject to further abuse. The NYPD has demonstrated a complete inability to police itself, a reality only more extreme when dealing with attitudes towards women of color and LGBTQ community. The Democratic Party members in control of City Council and the Mayor's office played a shell game with the city budget. Did they convince us that they are interested in our demand to strip funding from the NYPD? No. Or that they are concerned about police violence? No. The answer is a resounding no. I'm almost done here. But are women silent in this long battle against police violence? No. Despite immense challenges, women and trans women of color refuse to be silent or to allow their murdered relatives to be forgotten. From anti-lynching crusader Ida B. Wells to Emmett Till's mother, Mamie Till Mobley, to Juanita Young, who is a resident of the Bronx, who lost her son Malcolm Ferguson, who was murdered by the police. Couldn't be here today, but she is here in spirit. She still suffers injuries because the police came to her apartment, harassed her, practically threw her down the stairs, and this was after her son was murdered because she refused to be silent and she kept standing up to police brutality. So it's important for us to be out here, to stand with her, to stand with all the other mothers that have lost their children to police brutality. The time is right for women, people of color, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer folks, immigrants, poor women, and all those most affected by cop violence to organize together for an elected civilian review board that will put the power over the police in the hands of the community and gives us an elected independent prosecutor that answers to the people and not the mayor or the police commissioner. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. When black women lives matter, all lives will matter. When black women lives matter, all lives will matter. Power to us. Take care.
All right, so on that note, I'm pretty sure, how do you spell racist? I'm pretty sure it's NYPD. How do you spell sexist? I'm pretty sure it's NYPD. How do you spell racist?
NYPD.
And how do you spell sexist?
NYPD.
Keep that in mind for when we march later, all right? Next up, we're going to hear from some healers and essential workers. We know that this pandemic has brought out even more data and statistics on how marginalized groups are targeted, even with a pandemic that is already targeting them. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Arka Deb, and he's from the Progressive Doctors Group.
I'm really happy to be here. I'm representing the Progressive Doctors Group, New York City Doctors Coalition, and Doctors for America, specifically the Gun Violence Prevention Committee. And I'm here because several years ago, myself and my beautiful partner, Dr. Zaveri here, we promised to do no harm, but I think there's more to it. If we see harm, we're supposed to do something. And I guess when I was asked to say something about this, I didn't have to look back too far. I'm a psychiatrist. We take care of people in mental health crises as they're coming into our acute care facilities here in the hospitals. In police, they're tasked with bringing in people with mental health crises into our facilities. Just a few weeks ago in the morning, several of us were pissed off when one officer brought someone in a mental health crisis. As they handed them over, we realized that this person was agitated, needed to be restrained, but we could do so through clinical means, through safe means. While the officer was there, they decided to use police force. We had to say multiple times, this person's no longer in custody, this is our patient, they're under our care. Luckily, nothing happened that episode, but we had to stand up. There's much more that's happening, and we have to stand up for much more. The worst that can happen in police encounters is fatal police encounters, especially with deadly violence. Out of the police encounters every year that end in deadly violence, about 25 to 50% are estimated to be where people with mental health diagnoses end up dead. That's what I'm here for, because all those lives matter. Especially because here in New York City, the biggest problem, most embarrassing problem, is that while 50% of the population is black and brown, in Rikers Island, 90% of the population is black and brown. The people being arrested, detained, and incarcerated are too often black and brown and having mental illness diagnoses. So we're here to protect them. I believe the mortality and injury and trauma that we're experiencing out there to those with mental illness requires civilian oversight from now on. The elected civilian review board is necessary to protect my patients. But as soon as I wrote that, I knew I had to reframe that. These aren't patients, these are our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends, they're our spouses, they're our partners, they're our children, they're our parents. We need the ECRB to protect those with mental illness diagnosis, to protect ourselves, not just so we could do no harm, so that when we see harm, we have to do something about it. Thank you for having me.
Black mental health. Black mental health. All right, awesome. Next up, we have Dr. Kamini Dubé, and she's from the NYC Coalition to Dismantle Racism in the Health System. Yes.
All right, everybody, I'm going to say no justice, and you know what to say. No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
Black lives. Black lives. You know what? We don't hold any of our institutions accountable. Our health system hasn't been held accountable to treat all patients. Government isn't held accountable, and the NYPD has not been held accountable either. I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, a largely Caribbean community. Everybody, any Guyanese people here? Jamaicans? I know we got some Jamaicans here. So I grew up in that community where police cars were parked outside of our elementary and junior high schools, not for safety, but ready to pick kids up and initiate a cycle of incarceration and re-entry. One of my loved ones was among those departed to Guyana after police wanted to make an example out of him for something a white man wouldn't be handed a ticket for. Police officer present may ensure safety in white communities, but often policing translate into harm in communities of color. I am now an emergency medicine resident physician at a hospital that receives and treats patients from Rikers. I listen to my patients and admire their resilience despite enduring the most horrible manifestations of structural racism and injustice. In New York City and the nation as a whole, police officers are tasked with addressing issues of public health. Why? Because we failed. The public health system failed. They address homelessness, alcohol use and substance use disorders, sex trafficking, mental health disorders, and domestic violence. However, insufficiently trained officers, structural racism, and the disconnect between the criminal justice system and public health systems have resulted in police brutality, dehumanization, criminalization of Black men and women. Black lives? In my emergency department, I've treated patients who have been harmed by police officers unintentionally and intentionally in an effort to subdue and have them comply with oppressive systems. Bystanders struck with tasers and tear gas. I've removed taser barbs from bodies. Rubber bullets have caused serious injuries, including fractures and blindness. In 3 years, like Dr. Arca just said, 14 people experiencing mental health crises in the street have died at the hands of police. We have failed these people. I can't breathe, to me, and as emergency medicine physician, are three of the most horrifying words. And to think that someone that's tasked with ensuring safety kneels on a distressed man's neck. If that's not hurtful, or at least problematic, I hope you now realize that it's a crime and police officers must be held accountable. Police officers are not held accountable for their very often problematic and sometimes deadly actions. As a doctor and a public health official, I stand here with all of you to learn, to listen, and I'm breaking silence to demand accountability. In our commitment to this path of justice, we hope not just to save Black lives, we do that, but we hope to save humanity by finally valuing Black lives. A civilian community board elected by the communities we took an oath to serve is the most important next step at ensuring accountability. So one more time, no justice?
No peace.
No justice?
No peace.
I'm so grateful to this committee and to all of you for joining. We need to speak larger, louder, grow our force. The time is now. And those who are silent for years and years and years, now is the time to break silence because we need to dismantle this fucked up system. Ready? One more time. Black lives
matter.
Black lives
matter.
Black lives
matter.
Thank you so much.
So these testimonies are part of why we had to have defunding the NYPD in our program. We need money for healthcare, not police. We need money for rehab, not police. We need money for care, not for police. So keep that in mind as you join us today. Up next, we have a powerful Black speaker from the Walking While Trans Coalition. Please welcome T.S. Candy.
Fight those police unions. Get those pockets.
Hey everyone. My name is T.S. Candy. I'm the founder of Black Trans Nation, the founder of Black Trans News LLC. I'm also the leader of Decrim New York and the Repeal the Walking While Trans ban. I'm here today to be a voice for the voiceless and a face for the faceless. I'm a transgender leader, and living here in New York has been a struggle. We're facing challenges of just existing. It's frustrating when we have law officials as well as law enforcement enforcing slavery codes and criminalizing us due to slavery codes. It's frustrating when we talk about defunding the police and there are so many black and brown lives that's on the line and that's the front face when the criminal justice systems was never, it was never here to protect us. It was never written to protect us, so it's not a black and brown issue, it's a white issue. It's frustrating being a black transgender woman, and by the way that I dress today, it's hot outside, so I want to feel, I want to feel good. And just by me dressing like this, I can leave here today and be criminalized for prostitution just by what I'm wearing today. And that's not fair, and that's not right. It's frustrating when you are black and you are criminalized for being black and criminalized for being trans because they criminalize something that they don't know. Something that they fear it, so they criminalize it. And that's not right. The loitering for the purpose of prostitution, that's the repeal the walking while trans ban. Transgender and cis women, black and brown, get stopped and frisked from where they're standing. We have law enforcement that's sworn that they identify transgender women by their Adam's apple, and that's not right. To criminalize them for prostitution when we're not even prostituting. The 45th has been complicit to our community and has shown poor leadership and given the okay for religion, policies and procedures that was created for us to follow. They criminalize us because of the born to believe system. We demand that the black and brown transgender women, we have a community board. We demand that law enforcement invest their money into community so community can clean up community. The only ones that know how to deal with community is community. It's frustrating when you can do an 8-week to 21-month program, not even a 21 month, I would say 18 weeks, less than 6 months, just 6 months to be a police officer, and that's not right. You don't even get enough education. We have attorneys that went through 8 years of school and more to defend citizens that's fighting for their existence. And you can just be a police officer within less than a year? That's not right. And you have the most power to criminalize and to persuade a one-sided state to believe in your lies. We demand to repeal the walking while trans ban and to repeal it now. We should not have to fear walking down the street and getting arrested. We shouldn't have to fear walking down the street and feeling shackled. We shouldn't have to fear being black and existing. We shouldn't have to fear being trans. It is our dignity, it's our liberty to just be. And it's been revoked. And that's not right. We have a high percentage of policing in the sex work community. They have made the sex workers they made a community a war zone. And it's frustrating when I'm not selling sex and I'm criminalized, and it leaves me more vulnerable to sell sex because now I can't get housing, I can't get health care, and I can't get employment because of my background. And that's not fair because they said I was a suspect to selling sex when I'm just existing and walking down the street. And state-sanctioned violence is real, and it goes unheard of, and that's not fair. Thank you for having me.
So the work that Miss Candy does is exactly what we try to center at the Campaign for an Elected Civilian Review Board. We know that Black people face police violence, and we know that women face police violence, and we know that trans folks face police violence. So imagine living in the skin of a Black trans woman. Our work is nothing if it does not center those directly affected by our violence. So we want to give a special shout out to Candy and her team for coming today. And we want to say that we support repealing the Walking While Trans ban, because every day our sisters and brothers are targeted. So say their names with me. Say her name. Remy Fells. Rhea Milton. And say his name, Tony McDade. Thank you. Gone but not forgotten. We got their backs always. The next set of speakers are going to be human and civil rights attorneys who can speak more to our legislation and the work that they do with the police as, unfortunate allies in that system. Please give it up first for Jared Trujillo from the Association of Legal Aid Attorneys.
Hey y'all. So recently I was on a date, and he asked me, how can you run a union and be opposed to the PBA? And I said, because they're not a labor organization. Labor organizations lift up workers. Labor organizations lift up every worker. The PBA, the SBA, and all these police unions, they're white supremacist organizations. They oppress people of color. They oppress people like Miss Candy. They oppress trans people. They oppress LGBTQ people. They do not belong to the labor movement. They're not part of the House of Labor. And the reason why we can't hold these killer cops accountable is because we don't have an ECRB. We don't have prosecutors that are actually going to put Black and brown lives in front of the PBA and SBA. We don't have accountability. The reason that we're in the streets now, and what you see on Twitter and all the videos that you see, that's nothing new. Since the inception of America, police have been the most oppressive force that this country has ever seen, and they've been centered in every single movement for oppression. The modern police system, they started to catch runaway slaves. If you look at pictures of Selma, Alabama, and everything from the civil rights movement, who was there hosing down Black folks? Who was there attacking Black folks with dogs? The police. Last week was Pride. Why did we have to have a Stonewall Rebellion in the first place? The police. The 1976, the year that the Walking Wild trans ban was passed by the legislature that Candy talked so much about, where the police arrested 9,500 mostly black and brown women, far too many trans women, for simply existing, for waiting for a bus, for smoking a cigarette, for existing in public spaces. That was the police. 1995, we all saw what happened to Rodney King. Police. 1999, when the police officers sodomized and brutalized and molested and almost killed Abner Louima. That was the police and the PBA covering it up. In the 2000s, we really saw what Vice can do. In 2017, we saw what they did to Yang Song, where they chased her to jump out of a window onto her death to not be raped by another Vice officer. That was the PBA. George Floyd, that was police. Breonna Taylor, that was police. And not only was it police, but it was our elected officials that do nothing to hold them accountable. The ECRB is not another bureaucratic organization. The ECRB is something that we need. The ECRB is something that New York needs to prioritize if we really care about black and brown lives more than we care about the PBA and the SBA. Just last week, I'm sorry, not even just last week, just a few days ago,
who's going to do it better than us, for us?
Our mayor and the Speaker of the City Council told us that they were defunding the NYPD, but they weren't. They told us that they were going to de-police our schools, but they didn't. Instead, they just shifted some things around, put school safety officers under the DOE's budget, and then gave them a 2% increase while they fired tons of black and brown women, particularly that are city workers. Defund the NYPD isn't just something fun to say. It's not just something that's on a mask. It's our demand that this city let black and brown people be excellent and let black and brown people walk down the street without fear of harassment by the racist NYPD and their racist unions. Thank y'all. I appreciate you all. I just want to shout out Candy again, my decrim sister, who puts her entire, everything that she has to give everything back to community. Give her money. She is collecting money for sex workers, and fuck NYPD.
Yeah, fuck the NYPD. I like how that sounds. Let's chant that later. Up next we have Royce Russell, who is not only a civil rights attorney here, but has lost a family member at the hands of the police. In 2012, his 18-year-old family member, Ramarley Graham, was murdered by the NYPD in the Bronx. So please welcome and give reverence to Royce Russell.
So I just want to make a quick edit. I am the attorney that represented Constance Malcolm, who lost a son, Ramarley Graham, who was 18 years old, who was shot to death by the NYPD in front of his grandmother and his little brother. And that is important because I'm going to make sure that my 2 minutes is less than 2 minutes because I think it's important to hear from her. But as an attorney standing here today, fighting for justice for those in our community, I want us to be careful as to the words that are being used and the words that we associate ourselves with. I've heard two things today. I heard radical and victim. Let me tell you, there's nothing radical about the ECRB. We should not adopt that at all. Actually, the actions and the requests are quite reasonable and rational. Now, the method to get that might be radical. I accept that. But radical, scratch it. It doesn't exist. It has been far too long that the community has been shut out from the process. And that will happen no longer. Electing officials, electing a person to do this job should translate to accountability and transparency, which we've asked for ever. My profession is practicing law. My life is an African-American male in America. And I don't want to sit down. I want to take part and be part of the solution. The other word I heard is victim. We're no longer going to be any victims. Scratch that. We're not victims of anything, because we're going to flip that to the other side. We're going to use the V to vote, as we just did and we just saw. We're going to use the I to intervene, as we are doing by way of social media every day, every single minute of the day. We're going to communicate and collaborate. That's why you see so many people here from so many different organizations, because we want the same mission. We're going to be truth tellers. And let me tell you, the truth is sometimes hard to tell. And it's even harder to listen to. But that's our job. And the hardest thing, which no one has talked about, but we have to come to grips with, because it's happening now, is that we have to be infiltrators. Everyone here is not here for the same reason. Be conscious of that. Be critical of that. But we also have to understand that somebody, someday, that is standing out here that want to change will have to put on those uniforms, because the change will not happen outside in. And we have to give the support for the change that happens inside out. Just like the NYPD 12, who decided, you know what, we're not going to participate in any more quotas. We're going to bow out, and we're going to sue. And we have to make a difference, which I believe we're doing today. And I commend you for doing that, and I hope making a difference continues on and on and on and on. And this is not a moment, this is a movement. I defer to Connie.
Hi everyone, again, my name is Constance Malcolm. I'm the mother for Ramali Graham. Ramali was 18 years old when he was murdered inside my home in front of his 6-year-old brother at the time, Shinar, which is now 14. Some of y'all might see him in the street with me protesting. Also my mom was there. They killed Ramali in front of him, and basically the cop that did it got away scot-free. He was charged, but he never got convicted. I fought and we got department charges, bring against him. And they found him guilty on those charges. So what he did on his day off on a Sunday, he went and resigned. So technically he wasn't even fired. But what I made sure that he was on the force no more. I made sure that he couldn't get a good guy letter to go to another department. And I made sure he couldn't carry a gun. So people might look at that and like, oh, you got justice. No, I prevented him from killing somebody else. And if that's what it takes, I'm happy with that. But right now, we calling for defunding the police. It might seem like a slap in the face right now because we didn't get everything that we wanted, but the fight doesn't stop here. We got to continue to fight because we need health care, we need schools, we need guidance counselor, and they want us to feel bad. They say, oh, we cutting funding and we have black and brown people that lose their job. No, they did that because if they cut the site. Because these politicians, they want to act like they're with us, but actually they're behind closed door making backdoor deals. So we have to call them out. Remember, it's election here, and go vote. Make your voice be heard. So thank you. I don't want to take up too much time, but I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Next up, we've got a concerned parent. Candace's words really resonate with a lot of victims because oftentimes police brutality leaves the burden on their families and their friends and their loved ones to find out and solve what happened to them. So next up, we have a parent from Parents Supporting Parents NY Inc., Miss Tanisha Grant.
Grand afternoon. Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
unacceptable. I can't hear you. Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
That's a little better. Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
I appreciate that. So with that being said, I want to say that I am Tanisha Grant, the CEO of Parents Supporting Parents New York. I am a public speaker. I am a mother of 3, and I am a grandmother of a very special autistic, nonverbal 3-year-old grandson. And I have been a black woman all my life. So therefore, when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm talking about my life. I'm sick of these excuses. I'm just sick of these fucking excuses. There's no excuse for what the fuck is going on but white supremacy. Can I hear you? Because I need some energy when I'm at the mic. This is a systemic racist fucking system that was made this way a very long time ago. But I'm gonna have to hold you accountable, because where were you before now? Black people been dying. Black people been had an officer's knee on their necks. Black people been pleading to be equal when we're fucking great. None of us would be fucking standing here right now if it wasn't for my ancestors. I need y'all to acknowledge that. We ain't here to play around. When we say that we want community to make some of these decisions about this police, that's the way it should have been a long time ago. Because how are police coming from Long Island, Westchester, Rochester? They don't know nothing about our fucking lives. They don't know nothing about being a city girl, a city boy. They don't know how our children cry. I have a 13-year-old son. He doesn't come outside. It's dangerous. He know his mom come outside so that it won't be dangerous for him one day. But right now it is. So right now I take all the risks and I say what I want and I say the truth. And if you are my white allies, you will agree with everything that's coming out my motherfucking mouth. I can't hear you. This is not one of those, okay, we're gonna be out here for a little while and then we're gonna go home. To me, this is a revolution. That's what we need, a revolution. That's what this is, because I plan to be in these streets until those police are out of our schools, out of our communities. I'm not going home until Breonna Taylor's murderers are under the fucking prison. Why should black people simply have to wish that officers that murder us are arrested? Get the, man, are you kidding me? If I shoot one of you right now, I'm going to prison. It should be the same for them. What makes them immune? You know what makes them immune? We don't pay attention. And we put the wrong people in office. Look at Bill de Blasio. He used his black family to get into office. That's right, I said it. He used his black family to get into office and then fuck this city. That ain't right. Who does that? What good man does that? Governor Cuomo. He took $1 billion from education, from the CARES Act, money that was given to us by the federal government. He wants to talk about Trump, Trump, Trump. What about you? Where were you in January? We knew this fucking pandemic was coming. Let's talk about it. If it hadn't been regular people in jail, in office, we wouldn't all be wearing masks right now. But I'm not a politician. I'm the one who pushes the politicians. I can't do that because I cannot sell my soul for my people. My people lay right around the corner. My ancestors lay right around the corner, right now. When I say Black Lives Matter, that means white people, it's time for y'all to step the fuck back. Y'all done had 400 plus years, honey. Step back. If you understand, if our lives matter, if you don't have to tell your kids to watch out for the police, then let Black leadership step up. Because I do this for free. I don't get paid 6 figures to tell y'all lies. I'll tell y'all the truth for free. Because I believe in us. I believe in community. I believe in something called the Rainbow Coalition that started with Fred Hampton. Now we can be that. But you gotta be honest. And you gotta face some hard truths. And when a Black person has something to say like me, you gotta put an H on your chest and handle it because you know it's the truth. And you know it's the truth. Too many of us have died. One of my parent members is the youngest daughter, is the mother of Eric Gardner's youngest daughter, Legacy. I know this woman. I love this woman. This woman is my sister. What the fuck do you think her watching what happened to George Floyd did to her? We are traumatized every day of our lives, and I'm tired, and I'm not having it anymore. So I'm going to tell y'all the truth. Y'all going to take it, and hopefully you will be better for it. Delron Smalls, say his name.
Delron Smalls.
Delron Smalls, say his name.
Delron Smalls.
In 2016, Delron Smalls was murdered by Wayne Isaacs in Brooklyn on July 4th at 12:05. Who remembers? And so many of us, you don't even remember. That's my friend. Knew that man half of my life. The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. And the strongest person in America is the Black woman. You better believe it, because you couldn't walk a day. You couldn't walk from here to there in my shoes. And all of this melanated chocolate that I have up here. You couldn't walk a day in my shoes, baby. You couldn't have been that foster kid that was given to the system. When a white man told her she couldn't know who her mother and father was because that was what they went in the room and decided. Sick of that shit. We should decide what happens to us. These people that decide what happens to us and write these budgets and lip service us, they not in our neighborhood. When the last time you seen them in our neighborhood? They not coming to our apartments. They not chilling at the barbecue on the sidewalk. So what the fuck do they know about funding our communities? They don't. And let me tell you something. If you think that New York doesn't have any money or is in any way broke, pandemic or not, I need you to go read something. You hear me? We have Wall Street. We have a billionaire's row. We are the only city in the world with a billionaire's row. No, these politicians simply refuse to do the right thing. And that's our money. That's our generational wealth. Because like I fucking said, my ancestors built this country. Acknowledge it, respect it, and white people do what? I can't hear you. White people do what? White people do what? Black people do what? Black people do what? White people do what? I love you all. My name is Tanisha Grant. I'm CEO of PSP NY. If you're a parent and need some help, get at me.
What a motherfucking queen. honestly, goals. Thank you for revitalizing us. We are in our last leg of this rally. And before I introduce you to some radicals who's really gonna get it cracking, what do we say to a racist institution? We say, it's time for revolution. Repeat after me. What do we say to a racist institution? It's time for revolution. What do we say to a racist institution? It's time for revolution. Fuck yeah, Ms. Grant is totally correct. It is time to revolutionize the way our government acts. It's time to revolutionize who has power in our city. And most importantly, it's time to revolutionize our minds so we can get behind the movement. Our next speaker is on the organizing committee of the Democratic Socialists for America's Afro-Socialists and Socialists of Color Caucus. He is doing the work, y'all, for Black and brown people, and he can speak some truth to this revolution that's coming. So please welcome Robert Cuffey.
Not that tall. How y'all doing? Good. My name is Robert Cuffey, and yes, I'm with the Afro-Socialist Caucus of the DSA. I'm also with the Labor Branch, and I'm a proud member of DC 37, Local 371. I'm a member of the Transnational Solidarity Network. I'm the co-founder of the Socialist Workers Alliance of Guyana. Let me tell you, when I was 16 in the year 2002, my mother moved me to this country because at the time, Guyana was gripped by a drug war, and the primary victims were young Black men who would turn up dead on the street. What fucking irony that we now live in a country where Black men can't leave their homes and walk in peace. Come to America, they said. This is the safe place, they said. This is the land of milk and honey, they said. We're over here, we might as well be burning in the melting pot. Freedom for who? Not for me. Before I get into my actual speech, I want to leave off where Tanisha started by giving some energy, because we have to remember the people who are gone. I'm only 34 years old. There's no reason I should have been doing this for 12 years. There's no reason I should have been on the street in 2008 asking for justice for Sean Bell. So I want y'all to say with me what we said then. Say, we remember Sean Bell?
We remember Sean Bell.
NYPD, go to hell.
NYPD, go to hell.
We remember Sean Bell?
We remember Sean Bell.
NYPD, go to hell.
NYPD, go to hell.
So, we're in a moment where Black people have hit the front lines, right? And to use my favorite saying, we've burned shit down and fucked shit up. And all of a sudden, you're seeing opinion polls in the New York Times saying, well, oh my God, there really must be a problem with the police. You know, it's not just these crazy Black people. So I'm saying, yes, we need an elected civilian review board, but I want to talk about how we're going to get there and talk about this thing called accountability. You see, when the white supremacist Orange monstrosity in the White House gives the green light to police officers and ICE officers to rough people up, police officers are not held accountable. When our Democratic Governor Cuomo and our Democratic Mayor de Blasio give the green light to the NYPD to run over peaceful protesters, that's not accountability. And when the state attorney general, who claims she's unbought and unbossed, holds show trials into the violence against protesters and does not end up charging, arresting, convicting, or jailing the killer cops, that's not accountability. The next time Tish James comes and asks for your vote, you ask her, what have you done for me lately? Yeah. The next time any politician comes to you and asks for your vote, ask them, well, what about the ECRB? How are we going to hold the police accountable? And now let me ask you, do we trust the police to police themselves?
No.
Do we trust the police to police themselves?
No.
Listen, we've been in the streets fighting for a long time, you know? We didn't get full justice for Eric Garner, but the fact that we got Pantaleo fired meant a lot. So give it up for Eric Garner. And remember, the reason we had a ban on chokeholds is because people before my time fought a struggle for justice for Anthony Baez, who was choked out by the police and killed. And it's through that struggle we got a law that says you can't choke people no more. But even with that law, we don't get full justice. So we have to remain in the streets and not place our faith in any politicians who come around begging for a vote. So, y'all do me a favor, look over here with me. You see the space between those two cars? Monday, June 29th at 8 p.m., I led a march from Washington Square Park down here. In the blink of an eye, I was tackled by someone, dragged against the car so hard that I broke off the side view mirror. And when you hear people say shit like, "we keep us safe," it's not a joke. In an instant, 5 to 6 protesters detained the guy who did this to me. There were police officers right over here at the train station. They brought the guy over and said, look what he did to the young brother. You know what the police did? They let him go. They escorted him into the train station. They protected his identity. They came to an ambulance and took a picture of my ID, but I still have no idea who did this to me, right? I have a dislocated shoulder. I sat in a police ambulance for 2 hours waiting to make a report because they told me, oh, go to the hospital, Robert, and then you can always come back to the precinct to make a report. But who here feels safe in a precinct? Nobody. Not me. So let's get it straight. We protect us, not the police. The police are not going to keep us safe. Who keeps us safe? We 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 keep us safe. Who protects us? We protect us. Who protects us? We protect us. And listen, my arm might be fucked up, but my voice is here. Say, who protects us?
We protect us.
Who protects us?
We protect us.
I'm gonna wrap up soon, y'all, don't worry. So, let's make one thing very clear. No support to politicians who take money from the police. No support to politicians who take money from real estate. Because I don't know if you realize the things that cops protect, it's property, right? Should we try to take over the buildings being built in our neighborhoods to house the homeless and create some real affordable housing, who gonna show up but the police? Right? And how are the politicians gonna hold the police accountable when the real estate investors are buying them off? When this protest started, we had a helicopter overhead, right? And we all ignored it. But we can't ignore things like that. We have another helicopter over our head, and it's called capitalism. It's a constant present in our lives. We know it's there, but we can't give it a name. Walk away from this, and if anyone asks you, why the police killing people? Why can't we hold them accountable? Tell them it's because we live in a system based on the production of profit, based on profit and property over people's needs. And if we want an ECRB, we gotta turn that on its head to say people's lives matter. We gotta say Black lives matter. We gotta say Black women's lives matter. Black trans lives matter, right? Black immigrant lives matter. No one is devalued because they don't meet a certain criteria. We gotta stop looking out for the perfect victims of police brutality. I don't give a fuck what your rap sheet says. Stop killing us. Very simple. Now we have a chant we've been doing throughout all these protests. People have been saying, no justice,
no peace.
No justice,
no peace.
They say, what do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
And if we don't get it?
Shut it down.
This is a call to action, people. Because we didn't get it at the city council, and I don't see nobody shutting shit down. We got people at an encampment that defended themselves from the police when the police tried to charge them in riot gear earlier this week. They're out here shutting it down. We have to do the same. And I'll end with this. If you think it's hot today, the police and the politicians that protect them have no idea what's coming, because it's going to be a long, hot summer.
What do we say to a racist institution? What do we say to a racist institution?
Time for revolution.
Fuck yeah. And for our last speaker, we have a longtime revolutionary as well as the founding members of our campaign. We have Elias Holtz, member of the Freedom Socialist Party and the Campaign for an Elected Civilian Review Board.
Hello, beautiful people, beautiful, sweaty people. I have two versions, a long speech and a short one. Do you want the short one? Yeah, you want the short one. Okay. My message is simple then. Simple, short, and sweet. We have to unite and we have to fight. What are we fighting? We are fighting a system that gives cops who kill military-grade riot gear. And we're fighting a system that makes nurses who save lives wear garbage bags for protection gear during a pandemic. That's the system we are fighting. We are fighting a system that stole my friend Juanita Young's son from her in the year 2000, the year I graduated high school. His death needs to be avenged. We are fighting that system. We are fighting a system that is falling apart and needs police to defend law and order and keep the rule of the 1% intact. We are fighting that system. We are fighting a system, like my comrade said, that's called capitalism, but we are also fighting a system that has the Democratic Party in it. Because the Democratic Party, and I'm gonna name names, so feel free to boo. I'm gonna name Bill de Blasio, Corey Johnson, oh yeah, and Majority Leader of the Council, Lori Cumbo. You who voted yes on that NYPD budget, boo. You are a part of that system. You have chosen to defend a racist, abusive, violent police force that literally wages war on our community, this city, against, you have voted to defend them and the system over us, over the community. You are a part of that system. You have chosen to be a part of that system. You have made your choice, Democratic Party. But guess what? We get to make our choice. We have chosen to come here today. We have chosen to be a campaign that is multiracial, multi-generational, and we have chosen to come here and to unite and fight together. But what are we fighting for? We are uniting and we are fighting for community power. That is what we want. We want power, right? We want the power to fire police. We want the power to prosecute criminal police, right? We're not uniting and fighting for some bullshit reforms that aren't even lipstick on a pig, right? We're not uniting and fighting for these little scraps that Cuomo and de Blasio and the city council want to throw us so that we'll be happy and we'll go home. We're not uniting and fighting for that. We're uniting for power. What do we want? Power. We want power. We also want justice. The ECRB, an elected and empowered review board, takes power away from city council, it takes it away from the police commissioner and away from the police, and it gives it to the working class. And that is why it is a demand worth fighting for. An independent prosecutor would have the power to win justice for Juanita, for Malcolm, for Marley, for the long list of names that is way too long and that we want to stop with a period with the ECRB right now. We are cutting off the list. No more additions to that fucking list of names of people killed by the NYPD. We're gonna stop it with an independent prosecutor that will put their asses in jail. That's why we are fighting for that. How do we win? Well, I'm so glad that there are some union people here because, comrades, we have got to get our campaign union strong. okay? We have got to move beyond marches. Marches are not enough. I'm sorry to say Occupy City Hall is not enough. We've got to use our power as workers to shut the city down. That means we've got to sit in, walk out, shut it down. We've got to unite, fight, and we've also got to strike. We've got to start having strikes for Black lives, for queer lives, for trans lives, for our lives. Let me give you a little secret. The reason that revolutionaries stay in the long fight is because we know this secret. Do you want to know it? Yeah. This is the secret. All of the minorities who the police attack and that capitalism oppresses, the Black community, people of color, immigrants, indigenous people, queer and trans people, young people, our children, women, what do all of these minorities make up? The majority. If we all unite and we recognize our common enemy and we work together and we fight for not just each other but also ourselves, if we unite and fight, there are no pathetic politicians or police forces that can stand in our way and stop us. Are we going to be stopped?
No.
Are we going to be stopped?
No.
Are we going to be stopped?
No.
Unite and fight! Unite and fight! Unite and fight! Unite and fight! Thank you. Keep up the fight for an elected civilian review board. ECRB now.
ECRB now! All right, well, it's hotter than a motherfucker outside, so let's get up and get it cracking. Let's join the occupation. Let's unite and fight to defund the NYPD and to fight for an ECRB. I'm sorry, y'all seem tired. Are you ready to go? Y'all seem tired. Are you ready to go? Word. All right, so just to let y'all know about the route of the march, we will be heading this way, south out of Foley, west onto Chambers, marching around the City Hall block, and we will stop at Occupy City Hall to join the revolution, all right? Throughout the march, please feel free to stop and talk to campaign members like myself, like Elias, like Max and the band, like Pamela sitting down. Ask us your questions. We can get you involved in this fight. Like Elias said, the secret to radicalism is sustained organizing and a united coalition. We cannot do this without all of you. We cannot do this without the speakers that we've heard today. So let's get up, let's fucking unite, and let's get an ECRB passed. ECRB now! ECRB now! ECRB now! What do we do when lives are under attack? Stand up like that! What do we do? Stand up like that! Keep going.
Here in the U.S., police who break the law shouldn't be above the law. But time and time again, police officers commit obvious misconduct and get away with a slap on the wrist or no punishment at all. Meanwhile, if you and I are on the wrong side of police abuse, we have almost no support. In New York, if you're mistreated by the police, you can file a complaint with the Civilian Complaint Review Board, the CCRB. But that's not going to do much. Let's take a look at the numbers. New York City residents filed 4,487 complaints against the NYPD in 2017. The CCRB only investigated 1,349. These complaints included kicking and punching people, slamming people against objects, and macing and firing guns. Serious charges. And out of those complaints investigated, how many officers were fired as a result? Not one. The most severe discipline for offending officers? Loss of vacation days. This huge gap between complaints and results is bad enough, but the even bigger problem is that even when the CCRB does investigate, it only makes recommendations of discipline to the police commissioner, who can easily dilute them or ignore them completely. And that, and in fact, is exactly what happens. In 2017, 73% of CCRB recommendations were watered down or ignored by the NYPD. When police officers kill unarmed civilians, the system is even worse. In those cases, the district attorney's office is supposed to prosecute them. But district attorneys work side by side with the police every day, and history has shown how far they will go to protect their coworkers. We deserve an elected body that will represent the people and hold police accountable. That's what drives our mission, creating an elected civilian review board, or ECRB, a small name change for a game-changing idea. While the CCRB is appointed by City Hall, ours would be elected by the communities it serves, including those most impacted by police harassment and violence. The ECRB would have the power to subpoena, investigate, and most importantly, discipline offending officers with binding decisions, ones the police commissioner can't throw out. And for criminal cases, like police shootings, our amendment creates an elected special prosecutor who would prosecute accused officers with complete independence from the district attorney's office. We're fighting to push the elected board amendment through the New York City Council and through the New York City Charter Revision Commission. With enough pressure from people like you, we can win this historic fight. How can you help? First, tweet at the Charter Commission and your city council member to let them know you support an elected review board for New York City. Second, volunteer with the campaign. Find our next meeting on Facebook or reach out to join a street team. We are the New York City Campaign for an Elected Civilian Review Board, an energized coalition of groups and individuals led by those most affected by police violence. We need your help to win an elected board that will give the people the power to hold police accountable. Because without this, we're only waiting for another death in the headlines.